All information in this program is known to be accurate at the time of recording. Any commentary by the host is for discussion purposes only. Anyone labeled a person of interest by the host or family has not been charged with a crime. All suspects charged with crimes related or unrelated to a case covered are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Opinions and views expressed by the host do not represent views of the families or sponsors of this program. In the U.S., there are over 600,000 missing person cases reported each year. Many go unnoticed by the general public and are not covered by the media or investigated by law enforcement. Here is just one of these stories. From Grimm Media, I'm your host, Steve Stone, and this is the Grimm Truth Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 33 of the Grimm Truth Podcast, Finding Jane Mutter. I'm your host, Steve Stone. Before I begin the video, if you want to help us become a voice for the voiceless in search of the truth, there's only one thing you need to do. That's subscribe to the Grimm Truth Podcast YouTube channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode of the podcast or any other content related to the murdered and the missing. Also, smash that like button, leave us a comment. We need your help. The only way these videos get out to a broader audience is by liking these videos and commenting down below. We want your opinions. We want your takes. We want you to know what you think. Get involved. A lot of things go on in this world. A lot of things that just don't make sense. Prime example, everybody gets caught up in the trial of Johnny Depp and his ex-wife. Like, one of the stupidest things, in I've ever seen go on and there's other things that we can get involved with. And I think that if more people paid attention to cases like Jane's, for example, I think we could help bring more of these people home and bring attention to their cases. So please share these videos on your social media platforms, like, comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Jane's case is one of the cases that really just boggles my mind. A person vanishing without a trace, no nothing, no forwarding address, no place to look, just gone. Now, Jane lived with some people, and we're going to get to that here in a little bit, but the idea that a person can just fall off the face of the earth and no leads, nothing to go on, is just it's difficult to fathom. And I know it is for me. And this case is a case that we really need help on. We need those of you that watch and tune in. We need your help to find Jane and to help her family out. I had the wonderful pleasure with talking to Shirley, Jane's sister, and we talked about Jane as an individual and her best guess as to what happened and what she's heard. Jane went missing from Cascade, Colorado on May the 5th, 2018 at the age of 59. She was 5'6", 122 pounds with gray hair and brown eyes. She's Caucasian female, has a tattoo of a dream catcher with a date on her upper right arm, and we do have a photo of that tattoo that you'll see later on here in the podcast. Her ears are pierced, and she does wear eyeglasses. We had the pleasure of talking with Shirley, again, Jane's sister, and we talked about the type of person Jane was, her struggles that she was going through around the time of her disappearance. So let's get into that interview. And here we go, episode 33, Finding Jane Mutter. Tell me a little bit about Jane as best you can, like just in general, type of person she is, anything you could tell me that could help out regarding that.
Okay, Jane had 7 back surgeries, 3 neck surgeries, and she's got rods and pins and stuff in her back. She's a really outgoing person. She was in prison because she sold those to her best friend. They got busted. She got a few DWIs. She quit drinking after that when she moved up here. And she was just a happy-go-lucky person. She would take her skirt off her back, help somebody.
If you've followed me since the very beginning, or you're new to the Grimm Truth Podcast, we don't judge people. And because a person has an addiction issue, or they've been in trouble with the law, or they don't live they live a different life than the rest of us, that doesn't mean that they deserve to go missing. That doesn't mean they're any less of a human being. It doesn't mean that we can just close the book on Jane Mutter and others. That doesn't work that way. These are people that have family. And the one constant that I will continue to discuss and continue to point out and continue to drive home to anybody that'll listen, including law enforcement and other advocates, it does not matter at all what a person does, what a person's been through. If they live a life, they were on earth, they were born, their life is just as important as anybody else's. And Jane's life is no different than anybody else's. And we have to do whatever we can to have sympathy and empathy for the family, and do what we can to find her. A person can make decisions that might not be good or morally correct, but we're not judges. That's not our business to judge somebody. It's not law enforcement's business to judge a person for their shortcomings, their failings, for things that they perceive to be wrong. Jane still matters. And so as we continue on Jane's story, Jane's a human being, and she deserves the same respect, dignity, and compassion that anybody deserves. And she's missing. As we get into our next segment with Shirley, we discuss some people. Now, Jane lived with some people. She lived with a man named Lonnie Young. You heard Richard Bassey, a gentleman by the name of Eli. And we're going to talk about how just this quickly escalates and she's gone, and what happens after she's gone. So here's my continued interview with Shirley about finding Jane Mutter. Take a listen. So the audio in that clip was a little hard to hear. I did my best to try to amplify it, but let me recap. So Jane was, living with several people, renting a room, and she was cleaning houses. She was staying with a Richard Bassey, Lonnie Young, and Eli Romero. And they don't really talk about how she went missing right away, but that her stuff has been sent off to the Salvation Army, and it's gone. But they don't take everything. No. They keep her wallet, and they keep her cell phone. Excuse me. And then at the end of the segment you just heard, we hear that Eli tells the story that Lonnie hit Jane over the head with a baseball bat. Now, while conducting our research for the case and investigating, sometimes people are just hard to find. And in this case, some people are social media butterflies and some people aren't. And in this case, we don't have, a plethora of social media accounts for these people. However, I do want to talk about Lonnie. Lonnie has a significant arrest history And I want to just go back and look. Obviously, this is all a matter of public record, and we pulled some of these things up here. So this is an arrest that dated back February of 2004, and one of his charges in here was assault, touch to injure, and this was in Arizona. And he pled out, and he served time in jail for this in June of 2004. But that's not all that we found on Lonnie. He also has intimidated, threat, harassed witness with a phone, as well as drug paraphernalia, possession, and a marijuana violation. Now, the drug use is marijuana. It is what it is. My main concern with this with Lonnie is the assault to do bodily harm, or in this case, it says just so that we're accurate, assault, touch to injure. So he intended to injure whoever this person was, and then we have the intimidated, threaten, harass with a phone. So meaning he obviously wants to be in control of a situation, and then of course we have the drug use, and then he had another charge around the same time, which was criminal damage, where he destroyed some property. So that's just a little snippet of what we've gotten so far. But so Lonnie seems like he's got a bit of a temper issue. You throw that all in with drug use, and there's obviously something going on here. Now we have a missing woman, and her items are being sent off to the Salvation Army because they don't want them there. They want to get rid of them. And then we have the story from Eli, who I guess is suffering from some form of dementia, and he makes a comment to the effect that Lonnie hit Jane with a baseball bat. What continues to be frustrating on top of all this is cop carousel. And if you're not familiar with the term cop carousel, I'll be more than happy to explain it for you. Cop carousel is where a case just gets transferred from one detective to another. It's really not looked into. It's just passed over. And when there's no continuity in an investigation team, no continuity in the investigation period, it kind of just peters out the case, and there's really no drive, no motivation to do anything, to even want to solve it. What you're going to hear next about all this is really going to be puzzling, and just shows the bias that law enforcement have with, I would say, a majority of these cases. So here's Shirley explaining law enforcement and their lack of cooperation. Take a listen.
The detectives got heard of it. They went in there. Actually, it was Detective Thompson ran in there to question him, and they came up that he had dementia, that we couldn't use him in court for that now because he had that.
So because Eli had dementia, you couldn't use him?
Right. What I don't get, dementia, you're telling the truth. You got Alzheimer's. That's where you don't know what you're talking about. That they couldn't use him because of the dementia, which I thought was rock shit. I hate to swear, but these detectives don't really care because it's, I'm going to skip ahead part a little bit. When talked to my brother on Friday, and actually told him that we're not supposed to call him, that we ain't going to be having no more meetings.
Who's not having any meetings?
We were supposed to hear this. We were supposed to have meetings every 3 months. We had one September. We had a meeting where it was, okay, the detectives, Cat, spell her last name, Hudson, Huston. She's the detective that took it over now. And then there's Mitch. It's Mihalko, and he is he's a lieutenant. And then there's Charles F. Paul, Kull, and he is a lieutenant too, from El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Cat told my brother, I wrote it down from his Facebook. Cat had told him, the detectives told us not to call anymore or have meetings. The only time we will hear from them is if they have an arrest or they find her body.
Law enforcement sometimes surprises even me. So you've got a sister who's doing everything she humanly possibly can to locate her missing loved one. And keep in mind that Jane, Shirley, is Jane's next of kin. So legally, if anything happens, they need to notify Shirley. And law enforcement, I guess the original detective on the case, had set up a meeting where they met every 3 months. Now, I'm not a big fan of going that long, every 3 months, but I understand it. Like, okay, now you've got this new detective is telling the family, we're not talking to you anymore. Oh, and not only are we not talking to you anymore, and we're not going to give you any more meetings, we won't notify you until either an arrest has been made or a body's found. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? So basically what El Paso County Sheriff's Office is telling his family, fungu alamats, right? They're telling him to go, good luck. That's basically what they're saying. Like, we'll call you. Like, and this is that desensitized BS and the lack of bedside manner, the lack of treating people like a human being, basically saying, yeah, we'll do our best. If we find her, we'll let you know. You guys got to do better than that. I mean, I get it. There aren't going to be any ticker tape parades if anybody finds Jane Mutter. It's not, it's not Gabby Petito level missing person. May she rest in peace. But the lack of empathy and the ability to, listen and communicate with the family is completely off the charts and utter bullshit. Now, according to the police, according to the detectives of the El Paso County Sheriff's Office in Colorado, they polygraphed everybody and they passed. Now, polygraphs are not 100%. Polygraphs aren't admissible in court. Polygraphs aren't, they're not an exact science. They're a tool that's used in law enforcement. But passing a polygraph, a lot of things you don't have to be trained in the methods of the intelligence community or James Bond to pass a lie detector test. If you're taking any stimulants, they can they can affect a lie detector test. Definitely drug use can affect a lie detector test. So, I mean, you take that with a grain of salt, but that doesn't mean that these people didn't have anything to do with it. Now, if there's no evidence and there's nothing tracking right now Jane to these people that she was living with, that doesn't mean, well, we're done, we're throwing in the towel, we're not going to follow any more leads. In order to find somebody, you got to generate leads. When you're on a case, you have to work the case. There's proactive policing, and then there's sitting on your ass waiting for a clue to fall out of the sky. And clues very rarely fall out of the sky. A story that Lonnie was telling everybody was that Jane got into a vehicle, a red Jeep, with another man and took off and just left. Now, Jane was receiving Social Security, and that money hasn't been touched and it's not going anywhere. So the idea that she up and left doesn't add up. Now, we're not saying that someone might, could have abducted her, and that's 100% plausible. But again, you've got the story that was that Lonnie did something to her with a baseball bat. Then they got rid of her things. They couldn't bother calling and saying, "Hey, your sister's gone. Here's her stuff." No, and the cops had to go in to where Lonnie and them were staying and get the rest of her stuff, the phone and the wallet. So, I don't know. The grim truth about finding Jane Mutter is when you disappear and you disappear without a trace, it's like, on top of that, people can just erase you. I mean, you're already missing. And then what's left of this person that's missing is now being sent to a secondhand store. And then the family's suffering is compounded by the cop carousel, which you have rotating, non-consistent investigating of the case. You have the lack of communication and empathy by law enforcement, because you go from having an agreed upon information swapping session to the new detective and the team, in quotes, taking over the case and basically telling you, yeah, we'll see when we see you if anything falls out of the sky and land in our lap, because we're too busy to go look for Jane or create leads or post flyers or go to the media. Any of these proactive things that anybody else does for anybody, the perfect missing person candidate, okay? The Jane Doe that is from the burbs, that, works a 9 to 5, that, picture perfect life. They get the press conferences and the news coverage. Jane Mutter gets nothing. And that's BS. And it needs to stop. And I've tried to locate Lonnie. I found an address that matched where Jane was living. I have a phone number that matched everything that I was given. He's not talking. Has not returned my phone calls. Nothing. So I'm hoping that somebody out there that's watching this video right now, listening to my voice, watching this podcast, a Grim Guardian out there can lead us in the right direction to help find Jane Mutter. Now, she has a case in NamUs. NamUs is a wonderful database and a program that the family entered Jane in, and this helps with getting her name out on all the national databases that law enforcement communicates with, if this law enforcement decides to communicate with anybody. And also, they collect DNA if, God forbid, they locate remains and they're able to tie that DNA back to Jane if they do in fact find remains. And I think NamUs is a great organization. It's one of the saving graces, but you have to have law enforcement connect the dots and follow the case and, again, be proactive. And unfortunately, they're not doing that. I have also contacted the sheriff's office and have yet to receive a call back from them. Look, this is what people need to care about, and these are the things that have to change, and we're going to hold them accountable. The Grimm Truth Podcast is going to keep an eye on Jane's case. We are going to continue working Jane's case behind the scenes to try to talk to anybody, whether it's Lonnie or anybody else that's lived with her, been in contact with her, Richard, Bassey, anybody, because finding Jane Mutter is what matters, and we need everyone's help doing that. So please take a look at the flyer. Jane Aurelia Mutter went missing on May the 5th, 2018 from Cascade, Colorado. This is El Paso County. She was 59 years of age, 5 foot 622 pounds, gray hair, brown eyes. She has a tattoo of a dream catcher that we've seen on the screen. It also has a date above it as well, and that is going to be on the upper right arm bicep area. And again, we are also going to be posting this on the Grimm Truth Podcast Facebook page, as well as we'll leave a link in the description where you can go check that out. If anybody has any information on the whereabouts of Jane Mutter, or if you know someone who might have information on Jane Mutter, please contact the El Paso County Sheriff's Office at 719-520-7100. Again, that's 719-520-7100. You can also email me, Steve Stone at thegrimmtruth.com. That's Steve Stone at thegrimmtruth.com. And as always, you can remain anonymous. I need your help in finding Jane Mutter. That's going to do it for this episode of the Grimm Truth Podcast. I want to thank Shirley and the family of Jane Mutter for their patience in getting this episode out. I also want them to know that we aren't going to stop looking for Jane. We are going to continue our efforts. I have a wonderful group of researchers now that are going to continue helping me with these cases and tracking people down, and we're not going to give up. So I want to thank Shirley for her steadfast support and letting us tell their story and discussing Jane's case, and we will continue to look for her and get to the truth and hold the law enforcement community accountable, not giving up on Jane's case. That's going to do it here for episode 33, Finding Jane Mutter. I'm your host, Steve Stone, and this has been the Grimm Truth Podcast.